Dear YouTubers, welcome to Real Turkey channel. I am your usual host Atilla Yeşilada, sending his greetings from lovely and very sunny Istanbul. Today we're going to talk about censorship and what a nasty habit it is. And Turkey is committing the ultimate sin by trying to censor everything. In particular, I want to talk about a proposed new social media law, which shall be brought down to the Turkish Grand Assembly tomorrow to put social media into discipline. Now, there has been other attempts to stifle any content that President Erdogan or the governing party AKP doesn't like. And a few examples, as laughable as they may be, would tell you just how sad the situation is in Turkey. One of them is a proposed bill that would punish those who speak about food quality and food purity or organic foods on TV up to TL 50,000 liras, which is something like $7,000. As you may know, the quality of food is a very important thing, and people do have different opinions. Of course, I'm against snake oil salesmen and saleswomen and scheme artists who parade as experts on TV to sprout their strange theories about the food items or supplements they're selling. But I think medical authorities or nutritionologists, I don't know, I am sorry, this is my fifth language, not native tongue, appearing on live TV and telling people, guiding people as to what is appropriate, what is good for their health, ought to be perfectly legal and legitimate and even in fact encouraged. But this is not the way AKP looks at the situation. I investigated quite a bit why AKP is against discussing food quality or nutrition on TV, and I just couldn't find any reason. Even an avidly pro-AKP newspaper like Yeni Şafak, you could see the English version on net as Yeni Şafak English, spoke against this proposed legislation. Another one is punishing those who are members of WhatsApp groups where ideas about stock tips are being exchanged. Now, it is almost certain, and having been in these markets for 30 years, that certain individuals with bad intentions or manipulative intentions do penetrate these WhatsApp groups, or in fact organize these WhatsApp groups to peddle their own stock ideas, to front load. But punishing membership, punishing people who just want to learn about the stock exchange and, get informed about the stock ideas. Once again, these have no particular reason and violate the basic tenet of lawmaking, which is it should be in public interest and easily understandable and foreseeable and enforceable. These types of laws violate all three major principles of lawmaking. Let me spray my throat one more time. I have spoken a lot today, so it's very sore. But social media law is very interesting because it has a definite political purpose. It also tells us a lot about President Erdogan's mindset. He established the idea of controlling the press as one of the main pillars of his administration. He knew very early on that if you could control the mainstream media and thereby regulate the information flow going to the average Ahmad or Aisha on the street, he will have a step up on the opposition. And this has worked magically. First, several media groups like Sabah and Akşam, who were taken over by Turkish Deposit Insurance Fund because their owners couldn't pay their debts to the state, were sold to cronies of Mr. Erdogan, who turned them into pravdas. For those of you who are young, not old enough to remember the former Soviet Union, Pravda was the voice of Kremlin. It only published articles and news that Kremlin approved. Sabah, Akşam, Star have always have gone that particular route. I mean, they almost look identical, and they only publish things that Mr. Erdogan likes. He is also in firm control of Turkey's state-owned radio and television station and the Journalism Institute, Anatolian agency, of which English news you could see on Google when you search Turkey. In most places in Anatolia, TRT is still viewed as the voice of the authority and commands great respect. By completely controlling TRT's news flow, Mr. Erdogan managed to infiltrate the minds of the average voters. This worked for a while, and finally, the zenith of this single-voiced media approach was the surrender of Hürriyet, which belonged to Dogan Group and somewhat retained its impartiality or independence in terms of journalistic matters, were sold to another crony of Mr. Erdogan. I don't want to mention names because I might be liable to lawsuits. And Hürriyet, once the largest selling daily in Turkey, turned into a poor copy of Sabah, and now its circulation is down to 50,000 if reports go. When I was young, Hürriyet easily sold 1 million copies. As I've said, this approach of firmly controlling the media and not allowing the opposition to have any say in mainstream media has worked miracles for Mr. Erdogan. He essentially dictated what the nation saw and read, and obviously had a major influence on voting patterns. But as of 2010 or so, the media landscape started changing. Social media appeared with vengeance on the Turkish scene. Turks are just in love with social media. All of us use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Grindr, Snapchat. I don't know. Those are the ones I know. LinkedIn. And it turned out that increasingly over the years, people realized that the mainstream media was not a reliable source of information and commentary. So starting with the young generation, millennials or Z generation, people migrated to social media as well as to dissident news portals to obtain information. And that really caused a major difficulty for Mr. Erdogan because social media, as you know, is chaotic. I mean, there is all sorts of craziness out there, and the lunatic fringe is always present in large numbers, trolls. But also it's incredibly difficult to control because there are so many outlets, and if you shut down one, another, the same company just opens another news portal with a different name. As of today, I believe 76,000 websites are banned in Turkey. Some by court orders, but mostly by decrees or circulars of Rütük, Turkey's censorship watchdog, or by Turkey's internet watchdog, BTK, I believe its name. Most of those are porno websites, but quite a bit of them are websites that report things from the Kurdish perspective or from the Alawite perspective, that are for LGBTQs, and in general just publish dissonant material. But that wasn't enough because it's the social media platforms, in particular YouTube, which developed a huge number of people like me who shoot their own content and, advocate ideas that oppose those of AKP. Mr. Erdogan's first attempt to control social media was to hire trolls, people on the payroll whose official task is to crowd Twitter, Facebook, whatever, to give the impression that pro-AKP ideas are rising or to spread pro-AKP ideas. Obviously, no one knows the exact numbers, but reliable sources I've checked suggest that 7,000 to 11,000 young men and women may be employed as AK trolls, trolls whose only job is to retweet or generate content that are in tune with AKP's policies. By the way, I completely support this because it creates job opportunities for young people and they learn about social media. So more power to Mr. Erdogan. But despite this large number of trolls, the social media eventually, and for organic reasons, has come under the control of the opposition. That's not because Turkey's opposition parties, such as the main opposition party, CHP, or the pro-Kurdish Rights Party, HDP, or the new center-right party, EYP, to mention a few, have made a conscious effort to develop content to reach to the social media audiences. It just turns out to be that people with dissenting opinions are more in tune with the social media. They much more easily produce memes or memes. I never learned how to pronounce that word. It's spelled M-E-M-E. Things that go viral on social media much easier than the trolls. The only conscious effort by the opposition parties to have any kind of influence in social media was during Turkey's local elections in 2019, where CHP's mayors, Mr. İmamoğlu of Istanbul, Mr. Tunç Soyer of Izmir, Mr. Zeydan Karalar of Adana, and Mr. Mansur Yavaş of Ankara have used social media as an alternative means of campaigning, and all of them won the mayoral races against very strong AKP candidates. In fact, Mr. İmamoğlu of Istanbul won twice. The first election was cancelled or turned down by the High Election Board for flimsy reasons, I might say. So Mr. Erdogan realized that controlling social media or having an equal say to the opposition is extremely difficult. His current concerns focus on two new parties that were actually spin-offs or splinter groups from AKP, namely Mr. Ali Babacan's Deva Party and former PM Mr. Ahmet Davutoğlu's Gelecek or Future Party. These two gentlemen and their party organizations too have realized the potential of social media as an extremely cheap and effective way of spreading their ideas and their party platforms. One particular YouTube video where Mr. Ali Babacan was interviewed by some journalist, I honestly don't remember the lady's or the gentleman's name, was watched 1.3 million times. It's still being watched. And Mr. Ahmet Davutoğlu also gets similar numbers when he appears on YouTube channels. And that is a major threat to Mr. Erdogan because according to an average of current polls, Mr. Ali Babacan's Deva and Mr. Ahmet Davutoğlu's Future or Gelecek Party control roughly 4% of the national vote, which you might say is trivial. But currently, the balance between the pro-Erdogan alliance of AKP and MHP and the host of parties which are set up against them, called the National Alliance, is just so tight and so fragile that 4% of votes migrating from largely AKP votes, from AKP ranks to DEVA and future parties, could topple the Turkish political equilibrium in the next elections, whenever they may be. The DEVA and Gelecek Party votes might become the true swing votes in Turkish politics, and if these two gentlemen cooperate with the opposition alliance, Mr. Erdogan would lose the Grand Assembly. I cannot make any prediction that he would lose the presidency. He still remains popular, but as I've said, part of that popularity is because he has delivered steady prosperity up until 2 years ago. Part of it because the mainstream media jubilated him as the true leader of Turkey, as the best leader that one can possibly have. He realizes he's losing these advantages. So a new social media legislation has been proposed. Apparently, it's currently on the desk of Mr. Erdogan, and I expect him to approve it ASAP. And before the Grand Assembly goes on recess at the end of July, we will have a new social media law. Essentially, it's a censorship law. Now, I don't want to be partisan here. There are certain articles in the law which make sense, and in fact, I would support, such as all major social media platforms establishing rep offices in Turkey for tax purposes and for, lawsuits. The fact that these social media platforms migrate to tax havens and refuse to pay taxes in the domicile where their content is shown is a major problem for all of the countries, and a fair way of taxing them is yet to be invented. But obviously, countries say, look, you get your advertising from my country, you make money out of my country, but you pay your taxes in Cayman Islands or Barbados, whatever, I don't know. So that's a legitimate purpose for a new social media law, and those who don't pay their taxes ought to be punished. But the rest simply intends to control content so that people who produce on the social media do not put up stuff that is not in tune with AKP's policy. It gives broad authority to RTÜK, the media censorship watchdog, and BTK, another censorship watchdog. There might be even a third social media control board to instruct the social media platforms to remove certain content with or without a court order on grounds of having sexual content, of advocating LGBT causes, but more importantly, for what we call in Turkey catalog crimes. This is aiding and abetting terrorism, insulting Turkishness, patriotic values, and in any way fomenting discord among the people. These are poor translations because in modern democracies, equivalent laws don't exist. I watch American or British TV most of the time, and some German TV. If someone wants to bash Mrs. Merkel or Mr. Trump, within reason, that's perfectly fine. Mr. Trump won't even think of suing this. But it's not like that in Turkey. Insulting President Erdogan is a major crime punishable with up to 3 years in prison. So the social media law intends to completely wipe out dissident content from major platforms and turn social media into a poor copy of daily newspapers and mainstream TV channels, which only sprout out Mr. Erdogan's ideas. Now, Will that legislation succeed? No, that's the good part. It's going to fail big time, and it's going to backfire on Mr. Erdogan's popularity with certain voter segments. We have ample survey evidence that the new generation is hooked onto social media, and they already have a very poor opinion of Mr. Erdogan and AKP's politics. I think controlling media would turn the younger generation completely off AKP, and they will probably migrate to other parties or become politically more active. And mind you, the young people are not a small segment of voters. In 2023, when the regularly scheduled elections will be held, they'll make up roughly 20% of the eligible voters. So losing them is going to be a major blow to Mr. Erdogan. Secondly, I have investigated examples of China and Iran and Russia. There is really no simple way to censor social media. There seems to be two approaches, like in the United States, just let it free and have individuals sue content that's denigrating to them or that is damaging, or completely ban it, such as in China when your access to YouTube may be suddenly cut off. But anything in between is just not effective. One way or other, content that's unpleasant to the powers that be find their way to social media, and it's incredibly difficult to remove them because of the multitude of content on social media. Thousands of people in Turkey only put up new videos on YouTube. Turkey is one of the most heaviest users of Twitter. The older generation has migrated to Facebook, grandpas and grandmas who want to see what their grandchildren are saying. And Instagram is growing very rapidly. It's becoming the most popular choice of the younger generations. And given so much content, what kind of algorithms will be established, or how many censors or trolls will have to be hired, put on the state payroll to monitor all that content, is a big question mark that nobody has been able to answer. And this is part of the problems of Facebook. I don't agree with their policies about hate speech, political speech, false news, etc. But I believe, just from being a user, that part of the problem is that there is so much content, it is impossible to sift through it and to find out what is really hate speech, what is pedophilia, for instance, the ugliest crime in my view, or false news. The AIs are not AIs yet. They are simply sophisticated learning machines which have imperfect grasp of facial recognition, speech patterns, and the context of speech. So putting them in charge of regulating content or monitoring content doesn't work. And I'm fairly sure the same thing will happen in Turkey. A couple of dissident reporters or YouTubers will be taken off the air, so they'll use VPN and start an English language channel like I do. A couple of more news portals will be shut down, so they'll start under a new name, but nothing will change. What will change is Mr. Erdogan's reputation, if there is any left, as a democratic leader, and the support he gets from the younger generation, from those between 18 and say 35, who almost exclusively rely on social media for information and communication purposes. So this is another law that shows Mr. Erdogan has really no tolerance for opposition, and it also shows that he doesn't know how to control social media or public debate on issues that he considers unpleasant. Okay, this is all I have to say for today. You have just watched Real Turkey channel. As you see, we try to provide information and analysis on important matters for Turkey in an impartial way, even though impartiality is in the eye of the beholder. You may think I am a completely anti-Erdogan person. But if you like this video, please share it with others or anyone who does business with Turkey so that correct information can get across. This is Atilla Yeşilada saying goodbye from Istanbul.